Hello, I'm Thomas Hare, Chief Content Officer of the Performance-Driven Marketing Institute, a not-for-profit trade association that serves companies in the performance and direct-to-consumer marketing world. Welcome to the latest episode of Take 20, created by the PDMI's Brand Response Council. These 20-minute live conversations featuring leaders in the performance marketing world, speaking about the hottest topics in the industry, are scheduled twice monthly. Check out thepdmi.com/take-20 for the upcoming schedule. Before we get to the conversation, a quick housekeeping note. The group will be addressing any questions from the audience at the end of today's session, but you don't have to wait to ask them. Just utilize the questions tab on your control panel to type and send your question in. We'll be collecting them and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the final moments of the episode. So let's get to it. Today we're talking about data privacy in an expanding e-commerce universe. I'd like to welcome our host, Chris Foster, Vice President of New Business at Modern Postcard, a national direct marketing company that services businesses of all sizes and in all markets. Chris is the chair of our Brand Response Council. His guests today are Ron Hadler, Senior Director of Marketing Technology at Red Door Interactive, Dan Kelly, General Manager of Ad Sales at Dish Media, and on audio, but not video, Chelsea Reckell, an attorney in the e-commerce, privacy, and cybersecurity group at Venable LLP. So thank you all for joining us. Chris, take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Thomas, and thank you, panelists, and thank you, guests. So, data privacy, it's a great story. And we can all see the patterns, right? Back in the day, digital marketing explodes, and its effectiveness, though, relies on good data and relevancy to make it strong and work well for the brands that use it. So the brands then collect data from all sorts of places about us as consumers. Then there's the counterbalance of, hey, you're taking my data. And so governments then figure out how they step in and if they need to step in to protect consumers. And so then recently in the last number of years, we've experienced some very large waves, some tsunami-like waves, one called GDPR and the other wave from the 7th largest GDP in the world from California, CCPA, right? That was a big, big deal. And then newsflash, so one election result that we can all be certain of is the passage of California Proposition 24. If you're not in California, here's what it is. Prop 24 is expanding consumer privacy. This passed soundly with 56% of the vote. And the proposition allows consumers to prevent businesses from sharing personal information and limit the use of sensitive personal information, including geolocation, race, ethnicity, and health information, and the like. That's just the description of the proposition. I'm sure there's a ton of legal stuff in there that I don't even know about, but that will hopefully we can learn in the upcoming months and year. So, esteemed panel, the questions all marketers are asking as we head into 2021 and beyond, are there more large waves coming? Or are there small ripples that kind of will permeate through the industry and make small chips here and there away at the consumer privacy? Will brands like Google proactively block third-party cookies? Will larger brands that are maybe now under the scrutiny of the Congress, right? Some of the recent hearings that we've heard, is Congress going to move to enforce tighter privacy laws? Will the businesses do it themselves? Will Texas or Florida have statewide regulations like California did? So as businesses, we work hand in hand with regulators, legal experts, and consumers, and all these constituents have an opinion, right? I'm a consumer, and I post a photo of my cat on Catter Day on Facebook, and then suddenly I get advertisements for cat toys. I'm like, well, that's pretty relevant. I like that, thanks. But I sure don't want Facebook knowing who I am. All right, so I can't have it both ways, and no one can. So the question is, where's the path forward and where are the trends telling us? So joining us today, these great experts in the field, and we're looking for your opinions, right? There's no right or wrong answers because the future is murky and uncertain, but hopefully as thought leaders, you can talk about some of the ideas and considerations that you're working through, and so that our listeners and readers and viewers can see what should I be thinking about in the upcoming months and years. So thank you so much for being here. We're so excited welcoming Ron Hadler, VP of Data and Innovation from Red Door Interactive, Dan Kelly from Dish, and Chelsea Reckell, the attorney at Venable, like Thomas said, in the e-commerce, privacy, and cybersecurity group. It's the perfect thing to talk about with her. So Chelsea, I'll start with you. What do you think the impact will be with the passage of Proposition 24 in California?
Sure. Well, thanks so much, Chris. This is certainly a very timely day to have this discussion with the passage or likely passage. It's looking like it's passing with flying colors right now, Prop 24. So the CPRA is interesting because it starts to move towards a GDPR-like law and implements much more stronger language than the CCPA did. Now, I
Okay.
think the good news is for some that businesses that are looking at this law, there is going to be some time to come into compliance and deal with all of that. Those who went through CCPA know that that took a very long time to get all of those things in order to come up into compliance there. CPRA, it doesn't actually become operative until January 1st, 2023, but there is a look back period for CPRA for the access rights, which those familiar with CCPA know that there was a number of consumer rights, access, deletion, opt out of sales that consumers could access. There is a deadline for final regulations, July 1st, 2022, and then July 1st, 2023 is when the enforcement begins on CPRA. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And you know, what's interesting with CPRA is there are so many changes, but one of the big things is that it actually creates a new agency. And so this new agency, it'll be interesting to see how that interacts with the AG, how the regulations are going to come, because we already had quite a mess of that with CCPA. As some of you know, the regulations were supposed to be final in August, and then end of October, we got a October surprise and had more modifications issued there. I think some of the interesting provisions to watch for businesses for CPRA, or to know about now that it's passing, is it adds a right to correct inaccurate personal information. We saw that with GDPR. That wasn't in CCPA. It provides an express right to opt out of sharing personal information for cross-contextual behavioral advertising. CCPA, we just had selling, so now we have selling and sharing. It adds the sensitive personal information. That's a new category of data, which is like GDPR, but was not part of CCPA. A big one is that it expands the CCPA's limited private right of action. So under CCPA, there was a very limited private right of action just in the context of data breach. And now it adds to that definition a little bit for email and password information. But what's interesting for businesses is that you're seeing this private right of action under CCPA being used in a much broader context than it was meant for. So on its face, the CCPA actually limits the use of private right of action for this very limited space, but we saw plaintiffs coming through and trying to use it for all sorts of lawsuits. So there's a number of issues with CPRA to watch out for. But I think the bigger issue here is that in 2020, there was well over a dozen CCPA style bills, many of which had legs. But industry was able to convince legislatures that the CCPA was not a finished product, so no one should base new law off of that. That argument only goes so far this year because of CPRA, in my opinion. So the argument that we had last year is not as persuasive this year. And I think because of that, we'll see more bills coming through trying to mimic it. I think 2021 will be a big year of privacy, really of any kind, with facial recognition, IOB. We saw an explosion in Illinois of the facial recognition lawsuits, and I think other states may follow that as well. So my prediction moving forward is that you'll start to see states start to fall in line here and try and have their own laws. But you know, it's a question of what's going to force the federal government, what's going to force their hand, because we saw this happen in breach notification, right? But they were never forced to address it at the federal level there.
So that's so interesting, you know, and I wrote this down, Chelsea. So your prediction now is on paper, right? So we'll be able to contact you in a year or so to see how close you were.
We'll see.
So we'll see. And so Ron, I have a question for you as VP of Data and Innovation in a digital marketing agency. You're responsible for data and innovative ways to use that data to help your advertisers in a digital space. So how does this actually impact your ability, or what do you communicate to your clients as they start moving forward? I think your audio's off.
You need to embrace data privacy controls, right? This is really an opportunity to essentially build trust with your consumers, giving them and empower them to have control over their data. So this is not something that's going away. This is something that we are going to have to deal with. Eventually, it will make it to all 50 states, and hopefully, we're not having this spaghetti, kind of maze of laws to navigate, and then there will be something a little bit more national to help guide brands to do this the right way. But yeah, it's, there is a lot of data out there. I mean, in some of those data folks that you can purchase data, there's over 5,000 attributes that I can find on one single person. Not everybody has all 5,000 attributes, but that's a lot of different data points. And this idea that having that data and this feeling from consumers that data is creepy, and it's not the data that's creepy, it's the brands using the data that was where it gets creepy. So understanding that just because somebody's collecting data doesn't necessarily make it bad, it's just how people are using that. So we can encourage folks and brands, don't be creepy. It's kind of simple. And yeah, that's also why giving them control over their data is building that trust that, people want personalization. They want, the right ads. They want those cat ads that they are interested in. They want things that align with them. It's just giving them permission, giving them and building that trust is kind of how you kind of build that and go forward with data.
So that makes a lot of sense to me where, we've talked a lot about how do brands authentically interact and engage with their customers at every level, whether it's any kind of social movement issue that they want to connect with their own fans, or whether they build that trust with their consumer, giving them information and giving them permission to touch them. So Dan, I guess I would ask you, whereas Ron's on the digital marketing space, Dish in the media space, how does this data play out? Does it play out differently, or is it somewhat similar, or are the themes the same?
The themes are definitely the same. For us, it's like we have two animals basically at play though, because we have on the media side of things, we obviously want to work with clients to deliver their message to a relevant audience. But as an MVPD, the lifeline of our business is our subscribers. So we want to make sure that we, protect our subscribers at all costs and make sure that we are delivering them a service that they're happy with, right? Because without the subscribers, we do not have, we don't have the ad business that we have at Dish Media. So we're definitely, to Ron's point in regards to being safe about it or doing good with the data that you do have. Yes, we have a ton of information and data on our subscribers, but we would not use that maliciously, right? And we would make sure to protect that, and we would expect advertisers that we're working with to do the same. Because
so in terms of that,
addressable data is key.
So Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt because I thought that was such a really interesting point you just made. You're protecting your subscriber data, and you hold your advertisers to that kind of standard too. Right, that you are saying, hey, advertisers, I need you to kind of comply, or I need you to play by a good set of rules so that our consumers aren't freaked out. Dan just said it's not the data that's creepy, it's how brands use it. So do you find yourself offering guidance to your brand advertisers where you say, hey, this is going to verge on a little bit of creepy using that kind of data for this kind of audience?
We'll guide, but then we'll also, there's just certain things that we will not do. And we're very clear about that. And the way that we'll work with data, we will always have like a third-party safe haven in place, because we don't want the client's data. We don't want their the personal information on their customers and things like that, nor do we want them to have our information. So that's why we'll always have a safe haven in place to make sure that the data stays anonymized.
Sure, that makes sense.
It can be relevant to the subscriber, like the cat owner can see the cat ad and have that information, but it's still anonymized to the fact that they still don't know that they're sending a message to Chris.
Right.
They just know that they know that they're serving the ad to a cat person. So there's protections that are definitely in place. And again, we're always going to err for the subscriber as opposed to some of these things that are out there. And quite honestly, even with Prop 24, some of these things that people think, oh, now I have more privacy. Well, you also have more things you have to do to get that privacy.
Right.
So that's the key to it, is how do companies utilize some of these rules and regulations to their benefit, or to the benefit of the consumer? How easy are you making it for them to opt in or out of the data collection? And that's some of the details that are hidden within some of these propositions.
I like that.
Really
Ron, you're going to jump in.
I was going to say, that's a really great point that Dan made, is that, with the passage of Prop 24, it's an opt-out, right? You're not automatically opted out of all of data collection. You have to do that yourself. And so it's not just, I do it once and it's everywhere. So every website that you are engaging with, you have to make those choices. And so that is a little bit different than what like GDPR is. So it's a little bit more pressure on the consumers and having to do that and making sure they're doing what they want, versus just allowing it to kind of be opt out and you have to opt in to let it go. Because I mean, it's obvious that personal data is worth a lot of money, and I think there's eventually going to be the idea that we are going to be bargaining with brands to selling our personal data because we want that service, or maybe we only loan it to them for a certain period of time even. There's just a lot of things that this space is really, really interesting, and I do believe it is taking off, and a lot of exciting things to come.
So it's interesting that you both mentioned that. And Chelsea, we started with you, and if you don't mind, I'd like to wrap up with you. As lawyer listening to Dish and lawyer listening to Red Door Interactive, both talking about protecting their subscribers, holding their own advertisers accountable to certain levels of respect and data privacy in terms of how they do it. Is that music to your ears, or is that something where you don't think that might be enough for these folks to navigate in terms of managing their brand advertisers?
Well, look, CCPA and CPRA, I'll just go back to that as an example, put a number of restrictions and requirements around how you can use data, and working with service providers specifically. It says that you have to put contractual obligations in place for disclosures and how data can be used. So I think that's something that brands are taking a look at and having to update, and they were going through that with GDPR anyway, having to do that. So we may see some more laws that start implementing that, but I don't think that's the only brands, in my experience, that's not the only way that they protect the disclosures. They're very aware of what's going on.
Sure.
But yeah, the compliance part of it can get very very tedious, and I mean that in a way that self-regulation can be very effective in a lot of industries, particularly in the online advertising industry.
Sure.
So it's just sort of that battle right now of in compliance.
That's fantastic. These were such terrific points that you guys brought up, not only in detail, but thematically, right? The thematic concept of continuing to build trust with your consumer. The flip side of that trust is the consumer actually has to make that choice themselves, right? It is almost it is truly like well, in the age of COVID-19 still, it's a handshake, right? The consumer has to say, I'm going to choose to opt in or opt out, and I'm going to make the choices that I will make. Then you as brand are say, great, I'm going to show you what's available, and I'm going to trust that you're going to pay attention as a consumer, so then you don't get freaked out when you get that cat video. I love that. So, this is a great discussion. I'm sure we could do this all morning. It's closing up on 20, and we do want to do a take 20 or take 25, and also allow some time for questions from some of the guests coming in. So Thomas, I'm going to ask you, what kind of questions are coming in from the audience that we can field to our esteemed panel?
Yeah, we got 2 or 3 here, which should be of value. This one's an interesting one. Is there a particular medium that has historically been more progressive when it comes to consumer privacy protection, looking at perhaps TV advertising, the straight e-commerce, or social media e-commerce? I think that's one that anyone could jump in on.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that one as to which one is actually doing a better job, or is more progressive and being aggressive. I think, you know, one of the reasons we're getting these laws passed is folks were getting away and doing whatever they could. And so I think we're kind of holding everybody's feet to the fire with these laws, and people are complying and some people are dragging their feet. And, you know, it's kind of why I flip the script and say, embrace it, because it's not going away, and you do need to embrace it. You know, we're seeing even nonprofits who under the CCPA were not even we're not required to do that, doing it because it makes good business sense. You know, give your consumers control and they will trust you.
Interesting. I love it.
Yeah. And I would just add that, I mean, across the board in every category, you know, we're working with folks that want to utilize data and are trying to utilize data. Data that they have, data that we have in some way, shape, or form. Some definitely have better access and better levels of data, while others are, you know, a little further removed from it. But everyone is definitely interested in it. It's just a matter of at what level can they get specific, you know, purchase level data and data on their actual consumers. But first party data is definitely, you know, it's coveted and it's extremely well protected across the board. We're yet to work with any addressable advertiser that's just willing to just, you know, share that first party information. I've yet to see that, and I don't expect to ever see anybody do that.
Right. That makes sense. Great question. Tom, do you have another one?
Yeah, and this is actually, it's kind of a two-parter, and I think it's probably Chelsea's opportunity to take the first crack at this, given that it's about states and the federal government. First, which states are the most likely to enact their own data privacy laws in 2021? And second, what's the probability of the federal government setting new overarching regulations in the next 12 to 24 months in an attempt to make e-commerce more consistent coast to coast?
All right, Chelsea, too. I'm going to write this down so to see if your prognostications are going to be correct.
No pressure.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. The states are changing all the time. You see bills come up that you think are going to move forward pretty quickly and then get defeated, and industry steps in there. And so, you know, I think states, it's just going to be something to watch. I don't know that I have a firm answer on who's going to be next there. You know, we saw the New York law that went into effect, SHIELD Act, last year, that we saw enforcement start coming out with this year. So I'm not sure. On the federal level, though, I think it's in a hotter position than it has been before. And how you can tell that is because you start to have these Republican-sponsored privacy bills. And I think when you start seeing those come through, you're starting to see a little bit more of the meeting of the minds. There's a number of industry initiatives moving forth, working with both sides of the aisle, trying to get some federal language done. But we'll see. You can't give firm answers on that. But as I said before, I think this year is going to be an especially hot year, and we're starting to see things move a little quicker than they have previously.
Great.
Well, I'm looking forward to that because 2020 was such a boring year. So I'm glad something's going to happen in 2021 to shake things up a bit.
I think that's it, guys. We appreciate it. Really well done by everybody. Folks out there, if you want to reach out and get in touch with any of the folks on this, feel free to drop us a line at the PDMI, and we're happy to try to make a connection. And you know, we appreciate Chris, Chelsea, Ron, and Dan, you taking the time out to discuss this today. So thank you all. Appreciate it. Your next opportunity to attend a live online Take 20 episode is Wednesday, November 18th, as we take a look back, hopefully a look back at the impact of election media spending. Please visit thepdmi.com/take-20 to check out the upcoming schedule and register to attend any of those events today. Thanks again for checking out this episode of the PDMI's Take 20. Enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your work week. Stay safe and stay well. Take care.
Thanks, Tom. Take care.